Yeah, would you like to start with your introduction and then we can start with Basavraj sir's introduction?
Yes. Hi, guys. Thank you. First of all, thank you for taking out time this Sunday and coming to this session. I am Pooja Lapasia. I handle communications for the sustainability team at the Godrej Industries group of companies. And I am interested in personal finance since the last 4 years or so. And I hope to be financially free by 51. So that's my goal. Over to you, Vasavraj.
Yeah, I'm a certified financial planner and I completed my CFP in 2011. And from there onward, I started my blogging, Vasunivesh, and I then registered myself as a CB registered investment advisor in 2018. And currently, I'm handling around 300 plus clients across the globe.
Welcome, sir. Thank you for taking time today.
A pleasure. So, can we start?
Yes.
Yes.
Basavraj, first of all, I would like to start with a very simple question. When is the right time to start planning for your taxes?
Okay.
Is it?
See, usually when it comes to salary, we always try to get up when the employers will ask for the receipt or proofs. Rather than that, we have to start it immediately as and when we are start to earn. It is not about considering the financial years, but it is always when we start to earn, we have to plan for tax planning also. Okay, so that is the reason. There's no good time, bad time, or else month or day. It is always has to be our in our life whenever we start to earn, because whenever we are investing, it is obviously we have to consider the tax efficient way of investing. So obviously, it is not like a month or financial year end activity. Rather than that, it must be along with whatever we invest.
Hmm.
Okay.
So then, how should one even go about planning their taxes? I mean,
Okay.
for
See,
salaried person, they know that this is the income that they are going to earn. But for
yeah,
somebody starting as a freelancer or somebody starting out in a startup, so then
see,
how should they even plan this?
yeah. What I will try to say is that, see, when we say a tax planning, we always, as an Indians, we have a mentality that by hook or crook we want to save the tax by whatever the means. Okay,
Yes.
we feel pain to pay the tax. Rather than that, concentrating too much on the tax planning aspect, try to concentrate on even investment planning or else financial planning. Obviously, when we look at the financial planning, within that one, tax planning should be part of the financial planning, but it should not take the major portion. Okay, see, this is where many of us will do the mistake. Like we start investing, and immediately our first idea of investing is to save the tax, whether it is an entrepreneur or else salaried or whoever it is. Okay, so rather than concentrating on too much on that tax planning aspect, try to understand what are your financial goals at first and how I can explore the investment options. Within those investment options, what are the avenues which can save me to certain extent the tax? That should be the way we have to plan the tax planning, rather than concentrating our each and every rupee of investment on the tax planning.
Perfect. I think that makes perfect sense. I can actually relate to how I started my journey over here. So when I breached the tax bracket, the minimum tax bracket, my parents suggested कि okay, buy a house and then तेरा tax भी बच जाएगा, तेरी investment भी हो जाएगी, and that's what I did. And I'm not, frankly, not very happy with this investment at all
This
because
is how, yeah,
you
this
know
is
the
how
real estate returns.
the sellers will try to exploit us. That is the reason I used to say that in India, to sell any product, 2 to 3 things matters to us. One is if we say it is guaranteed. Second one, it is tax free and it will save me the tax. If three
Yes.
things are there, then you can sell any product in India.
So,
So
sir,
true.
how does someone who is salaried, say now it's the beginning of another financial year now. So, how does someone who is salaried should think about taxation? And because we as salaried guys also have to make some declarations in the beginning of the year with our employer. So, what should we do? How should we think about it? How should we plan? What kind of investment should we think about? What kind of insurances we need to think, and what all sections are relevant in the whole frame of tax planning for a salaried guy?
Surely, I will try to explain one by one the sections I will deal with. But at the same time, what I told again, I'm repeating again. See, each and every investment of whatever you are doing or saving must be linked to your financial goals.
Yes,
So that is
very
the reason.
important.
First, try to identify your financial goals, whether it may be your retirement goal, its education goal, its marriage goal, and accordingly, at first try to once you identify your financial goals, you yourself will realize the time horizon left to achieve those goals. Okay, I'm not saying that all the tax saving tools are helpful for me to achieve my financial independence or else achieve me for my goal reaching. Rather than that, try to identify the goals, and accordingly, once you identified your time horizons, first do the asset allocation between debt and equity. Okay, and within the debt and equity, try to choose the products which may be suitable for my goals. For example, I will give you public provident fund is a wonderful debt product. Okay, but and Sukanya Samruddhi Yojana, it's again a wonderful debt product which is made for girl child.
Yes.
But if my goal is around 10 years away and I am starting today the PPF account, obviously it will mature after 15 years, but I need the money at the 10th year, then obviously it is of no use for me. Okay, and at the same time, for example, for many salaried EPF is there. So in case of EPF, it is meant for the retirement. But many of us will think that when we have to withdraw it, I mean for eligibility like house buying and all those stuff. Rather than that, concentrate EPF as a dead part of your retirement goal. So if you start to break it up goal wise, asset allocation wise, then product wise, then obviously you will end up with tax saving instruments which may be helpful for you in tax saving and at the same time to reach your financial goals. Okay, and these are related to investment. Now coming back to the basics of financial planning. Okay, the basics of financial planning is that at first you have to think about how well you are prepared for any emergency. Emergency may be like a loss of life, meeting with an accident, hospitalization, or sudden income loss or job loss. For all these purposes, when I say loss of life, obviously I have to cover it by pure term life insurance. Okay, so the first priority when you want to plan something for tax planning or else investment planning or else you are starting your financial journey, first try to buy pure term life insurance of at least 15 to 20 times of your yearly income so that it will be handy if you are not here today. And again, it will be part of the ATC. Okay. Then the second one is health insurance. Many salaried usually depends on employer provided health insurance. This is again one more mistake what they will do. Rather than that, think in such a way that if I am out of the job today or else I start up my own, then how can I protect the cost of hospitalization? So in that sense, obviously, the health insurance will be a handy tool. Again, if you buy it, then again it will form the ATD bracket. Okay, and then third one, emergency fund, any of it is of just for your reference. Then you have to concentrate on goal-based investing. When I say goal-based investing, obviously choosing the products at the end, not at the beginning. This is where we do the mistake. When we start to invest, we first concentrate on which are the instruments makes me to save certain penny. We will never think of whether they are suitable to reach my financial goals or not. Rather than that, the product selection should be at end. Try to concentrate on what is required for you and what are your financial goals. So if you think in this reverse way, then obviously it will benefit your financial goals, and at the same time, it will help you to reach your tax saving instruments in a better way. And regarding the a certain tax sections, what I am going to share here is, as you may be aware, I think you all may be aware there are two tax regimes nowadays.
Yes.
So I will try to explain which are the tax sections available under old and new regime. Just I want to share my screen here.
Sure.
Do we need to make you admin? Okay.
Yeah.
I made your co-host, yeah.
This is interesting.
So this is the with respect to the new tax regime, I mean old tax regime. And here these are the lists which I'm going to share with you, which may help you to save the tax. First one is standard deduction of 50,000. I think you all may be aware. And second one, and the biggest one for the salaried, unluckily I should say, because this is the only one where we concentrate too much, and this is the only one where I can save the most. That is
Yes.
ATC. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Here
about
there are
1,50,000, and that's where we mostly concentrate. All
correct,
our
correct.
tax.
And nowadays, filling this 1,50,000 is very damn easy. I don't think
Yeah.
there is any difficult for all of you guys. Okay.
Yes.
Life insurance, EPF, PPF, NSC, and all this stuff. And the third one is ATCCC, which is again the contribution to any annuity plans by LIC or other insurers. And you have to make sure that it is a part of the ATC. I mean, this also be considered under the ATC only. I mean, the total limit is 1,50,000. And the second one is ATCCD1. The maximum limit here is 20% of annual income, and this is what you contribute to the NPS, and it is again a part of a ATC. Okay, and third one is ATCCD2. This is the employer contribution towards NPS, and this is again a different section, and it will not be part of the ATC, ATCCC, ATCCD1. So ATC, ATCCC, ATCCD1 combined together will form 1,50,000, but this ATCCD2 is employer contribution, which you can claim for the deduction. And the next one is ATCCD1B. The maximum limit which you can contribute under this section is 50,000 rupees. And the fourth one, next one is ATD, that is health insurance. 25,000 rupees what you pay towards the insurance, health insurance premium towards family is considered here. And if your parents are above 60 years of age, then up to 50,000 can be claimed under ATD. And I think that ATDD is little bit rare case, as it is related to certain dependents who may be disabled. ATDDB is again a special treatment. I don't want to go into that.
Just,
yeah.
Basaraj, one question, sorry. What would your opinion be in terms of NPS, right? Does it make sense as an instrument to actually be investing in or not? Because, since it is something beyond the 1.5 lakhs of the section ATC, right? Does the NPS thing actually make sense to try and leverage or not? Like, or when does it make sense to leverage and when does it not?
Okay. See, if you look at the NPS as an investment option, forget about the taxation and all those stuff. See, NPS is a kind of a horrible product, I may say. Many may not argue with this one, but I will tell you the reason.
I agree.
Behind it. Okay. See, the reason is that they set the retirement age as a 60. How many of us, we being in a self-employed or else private sector job, can sustain to work up to 60 years of age? First question. Second thing, it is a kind of a marriage between me and them for the next 60 years, irrespective of their performance. Okay. And third thing, if you look at their equity portfolio, they have not set any benchmark kind of a thing like, okay, if I invest 100 rupee, in that 100 rupee, how much should go towards large cap, mid cap, or small cap, or what is the strategy they are using, or what may be the benchmark they set for their performance tracking? It is unclear. And the biggest horrible thing is that now everyone is happy with the kind of a returns corporate corporate debt sector and the government debt sector generated the returns with respect to NPS. The main reason for generating around 10 to 12% since few years from the NPS is that currently we are under the lower interest rate regime. I mean, the interest rate is falling day by day. And these guys are holding the long-term bonds, which may be maturing around 10 years or 20 years. So that is the reason they are able to generate the higher returns. But if the trend start to reverse in case of an interest rate cycle, obviously these debt part will turn to give us the even negative returns also. Okay. And I will tell you one horrific situation what happened maybe 2 to 3 years back when I was just looking at the NPS portfolio. one fund manager, I think Kotak fund manager, they invested their portfolio in a Birla Sun Life one fund, active fund that also, where the charges are around 1%. These guys are saying that NPS is the least expensive product,
Hmm.
but they are investing my money in a product where the return, I mean the expenses are just around, around 1%. So there is no clarity even from the fund manager level or else from the government level, like how they are managing my equity portfolio and how they are managing my debt portfolio. I know they mentioned that age-wise, there is auto switch, and you can set your asset allocation also between debt and
Yes.
equity.
Yes.
But see, if I am managing my own money and if I am about to retire within few years, then obviously I will move my whole money into the debt, and that debt also may be like a liquid fund or else ultra short-term debt fund or money market fund, where the fund manager will hold the bonds or securities within 1 or 2 years. So obviously, my interest rate risk is very minimal. However, in this case, NPS, there is no such a categorization. They hold, suppose if someone is retiring at the age of 55, they hold all my debt part in the bonds or securities where they are maturing after 10 and 15 years. Even though there may be no downgrade risk or default risk with respect to the government bonds, but government bonds are highly sensitive to the interest rate risk. So considering all these aspects, I think NPS is not a great avenue to park your retirement fund. But to certain extent, you can exploit the additional Section 80 CCD 1B limit of 50,000 by contributing monthly around 4,000 rupees. Beyond that one, I don't think there is any great advantage with respect to the NPS.
Yeah, also one more thing to think about here is that 40% of the money goes to an annuity product. And again, India does not have very good annuity products. So,
Correct.
and that
And
income
that
is
again is a
taxable again.
taxable.
Yes,
Correct,
yes.
correct,
Oh.
correct.
So it's not a great product, honestly, right now. Or if things change in future, then we can change our opinion.
Correct, correct. And actually, 2 years back, PFRDA sent one request to the finance ministry. I think during the budget time that they want an option like a systematic withdrawal from the accumulated amount. Okay. But as of now, government not hit this request. I don't know when they will do this one. If that turn to be implemented, then I think that is the best option. But as of now, as per the current rule, as per the way they are managing our money, it is a horrific product.
Yeah.
Is
Thank
there
you.
anything good in it, ATC, like maybe the BPF or the 5-year FDs?
Yeah,
What?
again, in case of ATC, my first concentration is on life insurance. When I say life insurance, obviously I am pointing towards the pure term life insurance.
Yes.
And I think easily you can fill it up the gap of around 15 to 20,000 easily. Okay. And then the next step is to concentrate on PPF as a debt part of your goal, which are more than 15 years. Okay, assuming that you have a son and his graduation goal is 18 years away, then obviously when you are doing certain portion in debt and certain portion in equity, in that debt part you can use heavily towards PPF. Okay, and the same applies to the SSY, Sukanya Samruddhi Yojana. If you have a girl child,
Yes.
and you are investing certain amount, SSY is a fantastic debt product which may help us to save the tax and at the same time for our kids' education goal also.
That's for
And
21 years, I suppose.
pardon? Yeah.
21.
21 years from the start of the account.
Start of the account.
Okay. And then EPF, obviously, the wonderful product. Don't touch at any cost for any of your needs, and even don't withdraw it whenever you are changing the job, because it will create a huge difference for the 50-30 years of your contribution and a huge advantage for accumulation for your retirement corpus. And principal payment towards home loan, I want to discuss about the home loan, whether I have to keep the home loan for taxing or not in later on. But obviously, these are the few instruments I want to stress it: life insurance, EPF, PPF, SSY, ELSS. I don't think it is required for you if you fill up these gaps. Then tuition fee, and principal payment of home loan. I think these are the major instruments which I concentrate while doing the planning. And these are easily fill up the ATC gap.
So this is under the old regime. So in the new regime, we have no exemptions at all.
Correct. This is under the old regime. I want to explain you next slides about the new regime.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So this is a ATD. We discussed already an ATDDB. ATE is one more option where interest income on education loan of self, spouse, and children can be claimed there. ATE is again along with the ATC. It is different from ATEA. ATC. And ATC again donation. Section 80 TTA is one more thing which many of us will miss out here. The 10,000 rupees interest from savings account, what we get it. And 80 TDB interest income for senior citizens. That is, we have to force them to make sure that, because many senior citizens may be unaware of this one. And section 24 anyhow, all of you may be aware.
Yeah.
Section 87A again 12,500 if your income is less than 5 lakh. Now under the new tax regime, see, as per my knowledge, which one to adopt is the biggest confusion for many of us, whether I have to adopt the old tax regime or the new tax regime. When I looked at each and every individual cases, there's no standard rule that which may be beneficial for all of us. Okay, so we have to check it out at our level. Then only we can decide which is best beneficial for us. Accordingly, we can move. And here certain deductions or exemptions are available. Mobile or telephone reimbursement, leave travel allowance, entertainment allowance, HRA, children education, it may be small one. And any ATCC D2, employer contribution towards NPS, is still available under new tax regime. And 87A is again available here. So these are the few left us if we choose the new tax regime. My simple solution to choose which one is better for me is that if you can easily fill up the gap of all the deductions or exemptions available under the old regime, then I think you can choose the old tax regime. If you are finding it too difficult to fill those gaps, then you can easily choose the new tax regime.
Okay.
Any questions?
No, I think this is helpful.
I think this is helpful. What just on this, I think Basav, the other thing to, if you can help explain a little more, is how should one think about choosing between the new tax regime or the old tax regime? In what scenarios does one make more sense between the two options?
See, as I told you, there is no standard rule. If you check it on 100 case studies, 100 case studies will give you 100 different options. Okay, so we can't standardize in that sense. But in a brief, I will tell you, as I repeated just now, if you are able to fill it up the gap of the deductions and exemptions available under old tax regime, then I think to certain extent, old tax regime may helpful. Otherwise, it is always better to shift to the new tax regime where less headache is there. I think the future is new tax regime only. They want to discontinue the old tax regime slowly, because many of us will try to invest mainly to save the tax, which government also don't want. Okay, so if they move to the new tax regime in a one go, then obviously there may be a lot of issues. So that is the reason they maintain the two. But in future, I think the new tax regime is the one which we have to adopt.
That makes sense. And we actually have a question from Nikhil, who is asking, when is there any clarity on when does a mandatory switch to the new regime happen?
There is no such a mandatory. If you are a salaried, obviously you can choose any tax regime as per your comfortable in any year. Okay. But however, if you are a self-employed, obviously if you choose one tax regime, I mean whether it is old or new, then you can't shift back to the another one. Okay.
But can we make the switch again in the new financial year? Suppose I switch to new.
If you are a salaried, this is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask something?
If you are a self-employed, then pardon?
Someone has a question.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Who was that?
Yeah.
Please go for it.
Nikhil is right.
Yeah.
So our CA suggested that if you have a home loan, then the old tax regime is better for you, and if you don't have a home loan, then I think you should opt for new tax regime. Is that a
Yeah,
way?
that's what I told you. See,
Hmm.
ATC you might have filled easily,
Hmm.
and along with that, one additional tax benefit from the home loan means obviously you will be more beneficial with the old tax regime.
All right. I have more questions, but I'll ask towards the end.
Yeah, sure. Then any questions related to tax regime?
No, it's pretty clear. Anybody? No.
No, I think we can go on. If you have questions, we can come back to it in the end.
Okay. So the next question.
I think it'll be good when we are on the home loan topic. I think we can
Surely.
go a little deeper on that, and so we know the
Surely.
tax savings in when we are actually paying the home loan and we are in the process of buying equity in our houses. But there is also a big tax when we are selling our homes. There's also a play
Correct.
of a short-term and long-term capital over there. So
Correct.
so we
See,
want some clarity on that.
yeah, see, when you're buying the property, at first you must have a clarity about whether that property is for your own usage or an investment. This is where many of us will get the mistake. And even if I am buying the property for my own usage, I will think that I'm investing there. It is not an investment. I am not discussing about the tax perspective. I am discussing about the investment perspective here. Okay. And when you decide about yourself, then ideally I used to suggest that at least 50 to 60% of the cost of the property should be from your own funding. Don't go for a home loan just because they are there lined up in front of us to go for at least around 80 to 90% of the cost of the property.
Yeah.
Because if there is any issue with our income, then obviously we are under the mess, not those guys. Okay, they know very well that retail borrowers will never miss EMI, irrespective of whatever may be their financial situation. So that is the reason they usually line up in front of us. Don't do that mistake. Try to fund it at least 50 to 60% of the cost of the property from your own pocket. Then obviously without loan, it is impossible to buy the property in Indian perspective. So you can go it for the loan. But I want to stress here that don't hold the home loan just for the sake of tax benefit. This is where many of us will do the mistake. Let me give you the clarity about what I'm trying to say here. Suppose I am under 30% tax slab and some other guy is also under 30% tax slab, and I am having a loan and that guys may not have a home loan. Then obviously what I think that I'm getting the benefit under ATC, that is again a peanut kind of a thing. Let us forget about that. Along with that, under section 24B, I am getting certain up to 2 lakh rupees tax benefit because I am paying the interest to the banker.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously I will think that I am saving the tax by going for a home loan. But the guy who doesn't have a home loan, he is paying 60,000 rupees on that. He is paying around 60,000 rupees tax on that 2 lakh because he doesn't have a home loan. I think this is clear for all of you. I am having a home loan. I am saying 60,000 rupees on that 2 lakh rupees, and another guy doesn't have home loan and he
paying
is
60.
paying 60,000 tax because he doesn't have. For the sake of saving 60,000 rupees of a tax, I am donating 1,40,000 in the form of interest to the banker.
Yes.
However, the guy who doesn't have a home loan, even though he is paying 60,000 rupees tax, 1,40,000 is in his pocket. So if you think logically, then obviously there is no advantage of retaining the home loan for the tax saving purpose. However, in case of investment, for example, PPF, 5-year FD, NSC, or any other instruments, you are saving the tax. I mean, if you invest around 1,50,000 rupees in any of those instruments, obviously you will save around 30% tax. I mean, 45,000. And along with that 45,000, that 1,50,000 is also your asset, which is in your name. However, in this case, you are donating 1,40,000 just for the sake of saving 60,000 rupees. Okay, so that is the reason there is no great advantage of retaining the home loan just for the sake of tax benefit.
Yeah.
I think I cleared your point.
Yes.
Any questions on home loan related?
I think I want some clarification on when you, so sorry.
Yeah, Pooja, yours, please go for it.
So I just wanted some clarification on finally, when you do get to sell your home, which you had considered as an investment. So what are the tax implications over there?
Yeah, obviously,
And is there a way to save taxes over there?
See, to save the tax, obviously, long-term capital gain tax will be there. And I mean, to save the tax, obviously, you have two options. One, either you have to reinvest in the property. And second one, you have to go for the capital gain bonds, which is again up to 50 lakh only. And again, with a 5-year lock-in. Okay. So I don't think there's a great, and see, let us consider real estate as an investment, okay, not a commodity for our own usage. Okay, so in that case, see, across the India, if you check it out, the rental yield on the real estate, they are just around 2 to 3%, whether they are the commercial properties or residential properties. And even if we consider the price appreciation, yeah,
I mean, 2 to 3% seems a little higher right now. I mean, considering the market, I think they're more close to like 1.5% to 2.
Correct. And again, even if we consider around 3 to 4% of price appreciation, then the overall return on investment from the real estate is again not more than 8%. And many of us will try to borrow the second property by going for the loan, which is again the cost on the acquisition of the property, which we have to consider while investing in real estate kind of instruments. And again, your money will get locked in a big way. Suppose if you have 100 rupee net worth, in that one, if you can keep around 10 to 15 rupees in real estate just for the diversification purpose, it is a fantastic thing. But in many cases, buying a single property will tilt heavily towards real estate. And you can't withdraw it just partly. And assume that you are in a horrific situation like last year, COVID, and you want to sell it off the property. I think many may not come forward to buy it.
Yeah,
so I don't think real estate as an investment is a good option in Indian case. Maybe for diversification purpose, you can consider around 10 to 15% of your overall net worth.
That makes sense. So you suggest it's best to just pay the taxes, and when you sell the property, just pay your taxes and be out of it. So there's no need to.
And again, when you're going for a loan, then make sure that you clear it off within few years. Don't keep it beyond 5 years, or after 10 years you want to prepay the loan. Many people think that, okay, let me clear it off once after 10 years or 15 years. There is no great benefit. If you are very clear to clear it off, then try to clear the home loan within 5 years. After 5 years, anyhow you have given the biggest benefit to the lender. Yeah, and obviously there is no great advantage to prepay the loan.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay,
then, any questions?
Anybody, any questions?
We have one more from Nikhil on ELSS. What are your thoughts on ELSS?
Okay, see, it is only the advantage is that the lock-in is very minimal compared to all other ATC instruments. Within 3 years, we can easily come out from the ELSS. That is the only advantage I can see there. Apart from that, I don't think there is any great advantage in investing the ELSS. Okay, even I used to say the same thing. Like, see, equity is meant for my long-term goals. and debt is made for my short-term goals. But what these regulators did, I mean the government did, is that for ELSS, they kept the lock-in 3 years only. For other debt instruments for tax saving, which are there, they kept it at least 5 years. I think it should be reverse. For equity, it should be 5 years lock-in, and for debt, it should be like a bank FD and NSC kind of instruments. It should be 3 years. There's no great advantage in investing in ELSS apart from the lock-in period what it has. And again, if you're concentrating on the goal-based investing and that ELSS is forming a part of the equity part, then I don't think you have to withdraw it within 3 years. Obviously, you're the long-term investor. Then why have to choose the ELSS only? There are best debt instruments available. Let us first exploit those things like a PPF, EPF.
Makes sense. So, so you had briefly touched upon a few sections, like the senior citizen one that you mentioned, that is not very well known to people. Is an instrument that they can help save their taxes. So, is there anything else that people usually miss out, and which is a component or a section that people can avail some benefit?
Under old regime or new regime?
Under old, because new mein to there are very little things anyway.
Yeah, many people are unaware of BPF under EPF.
That is voluntary.
Correct. This is one of the biggest drawback. Many started to exploit recently, and that is the reason in budget 2021 the government capped to 2,50,000 only. But I think you can explore there up to 2,50,000 as this is a best debt instrument for your retirement goal.
Isn't it just like PPF, or is it different? How?
No, it is PPF is entirely different product than the EPF. You see, BPF is a part of EPF, and again, in case of BPF, you can contribute up to 88% of your basic plus DA. So already by default, you are paying around 12% of your salary.
Yes.
Remaining 88% you can pay it towards EPF. But the only disadvantage from now onward is that the cap should be yearly 2,50,000. Beyond that one, you can't.
Okay,
this is one aspect. Second aspect, even though I'm not a great fan of ULIPs, maybe to certain extent for the tax saving purpose, I mean tax-free return purpose, to certain extent you can exploit the ULIPs also. But again, there is a cap of around 2,50,000 rupees premium from this year onward. So to certain extent you can exploit there also by using the ULIPs, where the cost is minimal. That you have to concentrate very seriously. Whenever you are investing in any instruments, cost matters the most. Whether it is a life insurance, whether it is a mutual fund, or whoever it is. So when it comes to ULIP choosing, be sure that the cost is minimal and it will not cost you in a big way in the long run.
Okay.
Sir, on this ULIPs, so usually most ULIP products have high cost structures, like in the range of 1 to 2% or more. So how should someone, look into ULIPs? Where do you compare, and how do you find a very good ULIP product which has a lower cost and also beneficial to us over the longer term?
Yeah, to be frank, I'm not a fan of ULIP. The main reason is that there is no history of the fund performance, how it performed well with respect to the benchmarks again. And there is no clarity with respect to how they construct their equity portfolio, like how it is in NPS. And obviously, the third thing is that cost is very high compared to even mutual funds. For example, in case of a mutual funds, if you adopt the index strategy, I mean passive strategy, the costs are minimal, 0.1% in case of a passive index funds. So if you compare ULIPs to those kind of products in mutual funds, obviously cost is very horrific. So just I'm giving you an advantage of up to 2,50,000 premium you can exploit to save the tax. But I'm not recommending you ULIP for that purpose.
So PPF first.
PPF, EPF, SSY,
PPF.
these are the first thing you can fill it up. And again, if you have a lump sum amount and you want to targeting around 5 years of a goal, then obviously we can use NSE, 5-year FD. Those will match your requirement of ATC, and at the same time, it will help you to achieve your 5-year goal. And medical, I mean, ATD benefit, again, I think by buying your health insurance independently and for your parents also, I think you can exploit there to certain extent.
Makes sense.
Any questions in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, I had a question which I think is relevant for a few people for sure who are on the call, and I think in time might be relevant for most people. Is, are there any specific ways that one should think about from a saving tax perspective when you're sort of you have a partner, a legal partner, you're married and both of you are earning or something? So is there any specific way to manage finances as a couple in that sense, which is
Okay.
especially for tax we should keep in mind?
Yeah, I will tell you one thing. Many of us, usually if my spouse is unemployed, then obviously what we will think that instead of investing in my name, let us put the money in wife name, as he is under zero bracket. I mean, so obviously it will benefit for me. But because of the clubbing provisions, the source of the investment matters for the taxation purpose. Okay, let me give you an example. Assume that my wife is a housewife and I am the earning source of a person, and I am investing 100 rupee in my wife's name just to save the tax. Okay, and whatever I gifted there, I mean, or I donated that 100 rupee to her, and she is investing in some any instruments as per our requirement. Now, assume that from that 100 rupee, she earned around 10 rupee. That 10 rupee is my income, not her income, because of the curbing provision of the income tax. Okay, but whatever she will earn from that 10 rupee, assume that from that 10 rupee, if she earned 1 rupee, that 1 rupee is her income, but that 10 rupee is my income. So irrespective of all these stuff, it is again under my head only. Instead of that once, assume that both of you are working, then I suggest you, to certain extent, you can invest the major chunk of money from the person, in the name of the person who is under lower tax regime. Because at the end of the day, suppose husband is also earning 1 lakh rupees or wife is also earning, assume wife is earning around 50,000 rupees. In that case, it is always better you take care of the household expenses and other stuff. Let her whole 50,000 should be invested in her name only. Because after certain days, whatever the taxation is there, it will be under her head and it will be lower than what you are earning.
Got it. Interesting.
Makes sense.
Okay. And again, there are so many other options also, which I don't want to discuss here. It's a lengthy session. You can create the HUF also to save.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that. Yeah, I mean, can we create an HUF?
Yeah, you can create it, but yeah, but it requires again your understanding and your taxation perspective also. So you can exploit forming the HUF also. That may be one more option. But I think the simple strategy is invest from the person whose income tax slab is lower than my own name.
That makes sense.
Then, any questions?
Okay.
No, I guess we are good. Pooja, what's next?
Yes. So a lot of us are also investing directly in equities these days. Not going, they're investing in mutual funds, but also doing direct equity investment. So just wanted to understand the tax structure over there. And there's also a long-term and short-term capital gain play over there too. So how can we?
Yeah.
I know it's only, we have to pay taxes only when you realize the gains. So how does that work? And can we like realize the gains every year, fill up the gap of 1 lakh and then, tax harvesting basically.
Okay. See, I will tell you one thing. The taxation is same with respect to the mutual fund. So I'm just sharing with you the screen. If it is less than or if it is a long-term capital gain, then obviously up to 1 lakh is tax free, and beyond that one you have to pay the 10% tax. And if it is short term, then you have to pay the 15% tax.
Okay.
See, first identify whether direct equity is required for you or not. I know many people tried their hands post March 2020, and they are all sitting with a big profit. But I will tell you one thing, it is not going to happen continuously. Okay. See, direct investing is not easy. I know you, if you have a time and your zeal to learn, then obviously you can exploit. But I am asking you one thing. See, in your whole life, the biggest asset which can generate the highest return is your profession, not these investments. So concentrate on that profession where you can generate the higher returns. Okay, and let it be, I mean, whatever the investments are there, let it be in a passive mode to generate the higher returns in the long run. Don't waste your time 24/7 concentrating on which stock I have to buy next. Okay, we don't know which is the next Infosys, we don't know which is the next Tesla. And in such a situation, obviously, it is always better to have, I mean, holding the whole market is easy than holding the few stocks. It is highly risky.
True.
It may be loss or profit in both the sense. Okay, and again, what these guys used to say, I mean, the experts who appear in media and all those stuff, don't believe on all those. They are, I usually call them as a numerologist, because they create certain trends, and based on that one, they will arrive at certain judgment which may be feasible or may not be. And again, the person who is judging, giving the advice, his risk appetite is entirely different than mine. If he lose 1 crore also, it may not be a big issue for him. If I lose 10 lakh also, it may be a big issue for me. So try to understand your own risk appetite before entering into such a risky bets. And at the same time, I'm not saying that you must stay away from direct stocks. First, try to enter through mutual funds, understand the volatility of the stock market, maybe after 5 years, 10 years, then slowly enter into the direct stocks. I will give one example if you have a time.
Yes.
In 2019, one lady, she's IDBI Bank manager, she contacted me for review her portfolio. When I saw her portfolio, almost 100% of her portfolio is in equity only. Then I suggested her that first withdraw the money and do the asset allocation as per your goal. Then her question was that, see, my funds generated around 20 to 25% returns. Why the hell I have to move to the debt product which are generating 6 to 7%? I told her one thing that, see, luckily you started investing in 2008, from 2008. And that is the reason you never saw the crash, luckily. And it doesn't mean that you will never saw in future also. Okay. And to certain extent, she not satisfied with my answer. In the last year, in the month of March and April, she came out with a loss of around 40 to 50% from all her portfolio. And she contacted me in the month of August last year again for asking certain debt instruments to invest all money, and she regretted that she invested all the money there and she lost the money, and I don't want to enter into equity market again. Okay, and that story is over. Then again, last month she contacted me asking me which PMS is best for me to invest. Then I told her, a few months back you told that you don't want to enter into equity. Why you are entering into equity now? Her answer has surprised me. She wanted to enter into PMS just because whatever she lost last year, she wants to again gain it.
Oh, revenge trading. Oh, bad.
Correct. Yeah. So this is how the behavior works. See, in case of investing, 90% of your success depends on how you control your behavior, and especially when you are investing in a stock market. So try to stay away from direct stocks, and especially based on these tips or else platforms like PMS and all those stuff. Try to stick to the simple thing. And taxation, obviously, 10% for the long term if your gain is more than 1 lakh rupees. And again, I want to say one thing: how the media will impact in our decision of whatever we are investing. Just read this two paras of what it is written here. This is from ET Money. Here they are highlighting that tax harvesting each year is a fantastic thing. Assume you invested 5 lakh rupees in equity mutual fund, and they are saying so many, I mean, examples. Okay. So if you read this story, it looks like, okay, every year I have to harvest my tax saving by selling certain portion of my investment and exploiting that 1 lakh rupees tax-free, I mean, gain. Okay. But if you look at this, again, the different story, this is from Value Research. Okay. What they did is that they did the same story of tax harvesting, and they just saw that what is the difference between by this whole exercise of yearly tax harvesting to the person who not did anything. You notice that hardly it matters when it comes to effective rate of return. The person who harvested may be earning around 14.33%, but the person who not harvested, just simply invested, is sitting with 14.04%. Okay, so don't waste your time on all these strategies. Rather than that, look at the bigger picture. And again, if you remember perfectly, few years back, up to 2018, there was no capital gain tax, I mean long-term capital gain tax on equity.
Yes.
A few years back, there was a tax on equity. Again, they removed. Again, they reintroduced in 2018. And if you remember the 2018 budget, immediately after 2018 budget, the whole world cried as if the equity is the end for India.
Yes. Yeah.
No one knows about what happened in 2018 budget. Okay, so that is the reason we don't know the future taxation. So I don't think that is a great advantage. Maybe to a certain extent it will satisfy year on year that okay, I saved this much tax. But look at the bigger picture. As you are investing in equity for your long-term goals, I think there may be a very less advantage of doing all this exercise. Then any questions?
Interesting.
I don't think there are any questions. Yeah, sir, do you have anything else on your presentation? It's a very interesting presentation. So if you missed anything, please feel free to cover.
See, I always stress to my clients that don't concentrate too much on tax planning. I know it hurts all of us to pay the tax whenever we are doing, especially if your employer is deducting the TDS at the end of the day, especially last 3 months, and your take-home salary is very less, means obviously it hurt all of us. But don't look too much on tax planning. Concentrate on your financial goals. Concentrate on choosing the products which is suitable for you. During that process, you can concentrate on which is the best available avenue to certain extent save my tax. Otherwise, see, if you check it out, the life insurance industry, they exploit on all these things only. Especially if you check it out, the history of the LIC. Every year they will launch new products for the limited period during this period. I mean January to March or January to April, May, June. Because they know very well that all these salaried are running behind to save certain pennies. Okay, and we will never bother. If someone says that by investing here, if you say you are saying this much, means we blindly go there. Don't do that one. Try to understand your risk and never ask a question where to invest to a person who is selling something. Because they always try to say that for all your financial hurdles or questions, I have a solution. Don't think in that way. Try to do your own research and then do the investing. Otherwise, it is a horrific product. There are few people who invest in life insurance products where the premiums are around 5 to 10 lakh rupees a year. Returns are just 5%. How you can sustain in the long run with a 5% returns, even though it is a tax free?
It doesn't even beat inflation.
Correct. That is the reason, be cautious while choosing the tax saving instruments. And especially stay away from these bankers because they know well that what is your inflow and outflow in your savings account. And nowadays they turn to be like hot sellers. I mean, they have a target. Even if you go there to open the bank FDs or PPF, they will insist you to buy one product like certain insurance product or else certain mutual funds. Don't do that one. Do your own homework, and managing the money is very easy. All these guys, experts, made it so complicated that you have to rely on someone else. Don't do that one. If you don't know anything, simply put all your money in bank FD. That is a fantastic thing you can do to your money.
That's true. You're so right. I've stopped going to the bank because as soon as I go, they try to sell me something, which I
I will
don't.
give one example. Last month, I told one guy, one of my client to open a PPF account, and he went to the SBI bank. SBI bank telling him that the PPF interest rate is currently 6.9, but the actual rate of interest is 7.1. And they are telling him that every once in a quarter it will change and it will reduce it continuously, and it will reduce also. So rather than opening the PPF, go for one SBI life insurance product.
Oh God.
So these things will happen. So be sure whenever you are choosing the product for your tax saving also. Don't concentrate too much on tax saving. I know it is very much important, but think wisely. Use a common sense.
Makes sense. Thank
Then,
you.
All right.
any
You
question?
know, on a slightly, related, but I think different note, one question, and I understand that, Basav, you may have a, you may have a biased point of view here, but I would really like if you can give as unbiased an opinion as possible. So, for a lot of us, I think one of the questions, and personally also, has been, for my entire tax submissions, etc., is that something I should just sort of try and do myself very simply through, a ClearTax or one of these tools, or should I literally actually find and hire a family CA who will be the CA for my family for all the members and manage all this kind of money accounting stuff? Or should we just try and simply get every year whenever the tax time is coming, just get somebody to kind of do the whole tax submissions and stuff? What is the and I understand this again might be something that might be different depending on context, but
yes, there are certain tax experts in this session. I don't want to go against them, but the only thing what you can do is that, see, ClearTax and all these online platforms may be good, but to certain extent, your next door CA may understand your requirement in a better way. That is my understanding. And second way, choose a CA who is not representative of any products which he can indirectly want to sell it to you. There are a lot of CAs who are the representative of certain insurance products. I mean, not directly within his family. They may be representative of certain insurance companies or mutual fund companies, and just for the sake of tax saving, they try to sell it off certain products. So choose a CA who is completely giving you the conflict-free advice, and better you go with the next door CA rather than going for the ClearTax kind of online platforms.
got it. Okay. Okay, helpful. Vivek, I think you had a question, but I did address it myself. Everybody else, feel free to sort of chip in questions. We intentionally kind of kept at least a good 20-30 minutes for only questions, because we thought this might be something where people would want to have a bunch of questions. So yeah, feel free to ask, and if we generally don't have any questions, then we can sort of close up the session as well, unless Basu has something to add. So yeah, anyone, any questions?
So how should we go about if we have some freelancing income? Suppose I'm a salaried person, but I'm also doing some freelancing on the side, and suppose I earn something out of it. So shall I put it under my regular income? Shall I open a new company, or how does that work? It's not significant, but it is some part, and maybe it's growing. So
yeah, see, the advantage, I usually say that the biggest disadvantage with the salaried is that they have a very limited tax saving options when it comes to income, expenses, and all those stuff. However, if you are a freelancing, obviously, your profession is considered as a profit and gains from the business or profession, and whatever the expenses are there, obviously you can claim it as an expenses. So I think I'm not an expert to guide to the level of company or non-individual ways, but I think freelancing is a best way if you show it in your individual capacity.
okay. Okay, makes sense.
At least to a certain extent of threshold limit. Beyond that one, if your income grows, obviously it is better to form a company or else a kind of a organization. Then you can do it.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Then any questions?
Yeah, anyone else, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask.
Yeah, okay. I think we don't have any questions at the moment, so we can, I think, close it with that. Thank you so much, Basuji and Pooja also for sort of, helping moderate and run the whole session. Thank you. For everybody else, we'll sort of put together the notes from this session, and we might, annoy Basu for some additional inputs to add
Definitely.
some things. And Basu would be great to share this presentation with us also. And yeah, thank you everybody for the session. Have a good Sunday. Make sure to take out some half an hour more for some personal finance work. Yeah.
Surely. Guys, and happy Holi to all of you.
Thank
Happy
you.
Holi.
Happy Holi.
Happy Holi to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pooja. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.